So as we move in to your preferences, my preferences, it's your preference that we follow your preference. That's your preference, right? But
it is
okay,
the case.
It's my preference that we don't follow your preference, and that's my preference.
Great.
That's what you want?
Of this, that's the whole
So
point
then how do we make the
Andrew Wilson absolutely annihilates this lefty lunatic in this brutal debate. Let's see how it goes down.
That my preference is a system that allows for multiple types of people. And when I look at America as a democratic experiment, I see success all over the country. It's not a perfect country. We could do better, but I see success all over the country. I think this is a really good system that we have here. This is a system that allows for people like you and me to exist and have the same
now I need
right
you to
vote,
know.
for example.
I need you to note this. And you can go back right this second. You can rewind your own tape and you can see it for yourself. You said in the span of 20 seconds, I did not say that my preferences are the thing which I am appealing to for why it is that I want this form of government. And then went on to say, but my preference is this form of government. So are you appealing to anything external to your own? Stop. Are you appealing to anything external to your own preferences, or aren't you?
No, I would appeal to social utility and my idea of what would be good in service of that goal. I was pushing back against your take that I want secularism simply because I want secularism.
And why ought we follow social utility?
My reason. We ought follow social utility because I believe in pursuing a system
because
that
of your preferences. I believe
that would be, in my opinion, the best outcome for individuals that exist within that system.
So that's your preferences
I try to maximize good outcomes according to what I believe, as I assume you do.
Those are all your preferences.
The differences between you and me, you have a preference.
I have epistemic justification for knowledge. You do not have epistemic justification for knowledge. You can't justify how you even know a thing, let alone why we should govern with that thing. So as we move in to your preferences, my preferences, it's your preference that we follow your preference. That's your preference, right? But
it is
okay, it's my preference that we don't follow your preference, and that's my preference.
Great.
That's what you want?
That's the whole.
So then how do we make the determination as to who is right?
We would get into the minutia of why we think our systems are better than the other person's system.
Because of our preferences.
Exactly.
Well, if it's just because of if there's no justification outside of what is preferable to the individual, it's my preference that I rule everybody. What's wrong with that?
That is your opinion. I disagree.
Well, wait a second. You can't disagree. Yes. My preferences are just as valid as yours.
I'm not disagreeing that you have a preference.
Yeah, but what makes it less valid than yours?
Best outcome for the people that live within this system.
What makes my preference less good than your preference?
Dang, what an early owning already from Andrew Wilson, from this delusional liberal, getting crushed early on, pointing out his hypocrisies. What are you guys thinking about this so far? Sound off in the comment section below. Subscribe if you like content like this. Let's continue.
Talking about something like affirming identities. We're talking about unaliving rates. We're talking about this thing called social stigma.
Yeah, what makes my preference less viable than your preference?
I'm trying to give you an example. So in this specific case, that is an outcome that I don't like. I don't like seeing people
that's your preference again.
Unalive themselves.
Your preference again.
Or experience something like deep depression because of social stigma.
Don't you understand how ridiculous this is? Every time I ask you, why should we appeal to your preferences instead of mine for moral oughts? You say, because it's my preference that you do so every single time. I believe he's saying my preference. Everything is my preference, my preference, my preference.
Tap, or he's going to break his arm. He's going to break arm.
Do you have anything that you can justify this on outside of you? Should all moral oughts come from Hutch's brain and his preferences?
Brother, the justification that I'm giving you are things that exist outside of my experience. I'm not talking about my individual experience in this system. I'm talking about a system that most benefits everyone.
And why should we follow a system that benefits everyone?
Because we all want good outcomes.
No.
In accordance with our philosophical under.
The problem here is that his definition of something that fits for everybody doesn't fit for everybody. So, for instance, if you want a trans person to play in women's sports, that doesn't work for, that might work for this guy because he doesn't have to play against them in women's sports. But for the women that compete in those sports, that doesn't exactly work for them. How does this works for everybody's system if clearly it doesn't work for everybody? It is not a right for a trans woman to go into a woman's bathroom or to use it. It's not a right. I believe they should have the right to use a bathroom, a public bathroom, but not the woman's bathroom. And how does that fare to the women or the little girls or what have you that use those restrooms as well? How is that fair to them? How does this fairness system that you're talking about work for them? It doesn't. So the issue, they try to come from this virtuous place where they act like they're all high and mighty and they're virtuous and they're self-righteous. That's where a lot of these liberals come from. Every time I've either personally debated someone on the left or I've seen other debates, they always resort to that, well, I'm empathetic, I'm an empath, or, well, you know what, I just don't like to see bad things happen to these people, blah, 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 blah. I just like fairness. You know what, I just like equality. Well, you know, I just hate oppression. Like, who doesn't? Who doesn't hate oppression? Who doesn't like equality? Who doesn't like fairness? Everybody does. Those are something everyone shares in. The problem is everyone has their own definition. Not even their own definition. It's just that there are some people like this lunatic liberal right here that has his own definition of what fairness is. And listen, he might be coming because he's really concerned about the self-unaliving rates when it comes to trans people, but that's not because they're not allowed to play in women's sports. And it's not because people don't affirm their preferred gender identities. That's not where it comes from. If you're a person that truly believes, like you really think this is not just some kind of creep or pervert thing, you're actually one of the people that suffer from gender dysmorphia. I always get if it's gender dysphoria or gender dysmorphia, but you know what I'm talking about. If you actually suffer from this mental disease where you think that you're the opposite gender living in, you're a gender living in the opposite gender's body, you already have a whole slew of mental problems. I mean, if I don't know what the self-unaliving rate of like people who suffer from schizophrenia is, but if that were high too, does that mean that we need to affirm them when they say, hey, the radio is telling me to go do this? Or, you know what, this actor is trying to communicate with me through this TV show. Should we affirm them and go, you know what, you're absolutely right? And it would be bigoted of me to tell you otherwise. And I don't want to see the self-unaliving rate go up with schizophrenia. Like, no, that would not be the issue. You would tell the person with schizophrenia to seek some mental help. And that's what we should be doing with the legitimate people who suffer from this mental disorder. Not just let them use the women's bathroom and let them play in women's sports and let them go in women's prisons and all these women's spaces. It's not the answer. What do you guys think, though? Sound off in the comment section below. Smash that like button if you're enjoying so far. Let's continue.
So our preferences?
Yes.
Heat up like chicken.
Yeah, so then you're appealing to nothing more than your individual preferences. All of the world's morality and everything in it comes from Hutch's brain and his preferences. That's what's moral and immoral. Then give me a moral justification, external your preferences, and why we should follow them.
I believe that all morality is subjective. We don't derive it from, or I don't derive it from scripture. I derive it from my experience as a human being. And my philosophy, the one thing that I try to lead with is empathy.
Oh, there it is, though. There it is. The empathy. There it is. I told you. That's what it's always about with these people. Or at least that's what they always try to play it off. That's what it's about. That's what they always trick themselves into thinking that's what it's about.
That's it. And this is something that I was taught when it came to scripture, when we learned about Jesus' teaching. The two main rules that he gave was love the God your Father and love your neighbor. So even though I don't subscribe to Christianity at this point in my life, I still gleaned valuable lessons from the teachings of Christ. And I carry those teachings.
But that's all subjective preference, right?
Yes.
So if it's all subjective preference and you can appeal to
Wow. What an absolute schooling this was. These liberals, they have no idea what they're talking about because they don't have true principles that they stick to. Everything that they learn and everything that they spout, it comes from the top down. It's come from the Democrats. It's come from the lefty media, the talking points. And so they argue the talking points, but they don't really know what they're arguing for or against. They just know this is what I've been told, and now I'm going to spew it out to you. You know, that's why they get called NPCs, because that's absolutely how they act. Great job on Andrew Wilson here. This was not a really hard debate to win because this guy clearly doesn't know what he's talking about. But what do you guys think? Sound off in the comment section below. Subscribe to my channel if you enjoy content like this. And if you do enjoy content like this, I got a whole bunch more goodies on the screen for you to click away and enjoy.